Good morning, everybody. This is Ernie Post. I'm the State Director with the Pennsylvania SBDC program. I want to welcome you to today's SBA webinar, where Marcia McGavis will be explaining the application process for both the SBA EIDL loan and the SBA PPP loan that we have come to call it. And first, though, I want to just do a few housekeeping items. If you do have a question, if you can post that in chat, we will try to address questions in the chat box at different points when Marcia takes a break during her presentation. Some of the questions you pose, I know she will be addressing, so I will just wait for her to get to that point before we bring those questions up. The other question or point that I wanted to make is that we will be recording today's session, and that will be saved on the link on our website as well as today's presentation. So with that, also assisting us on the call today is Chris Walk. Chris is our Director of IT, and he will be helping Marcia with the advancing the slides, and he'll also have some comments to make about cybersecurity issues in this current environment. So we're fortunate to have Marcia McGavis join us. Marcia is, as I mentioned, Director of Capital Acquisition for the Pennsylvania SBDC program. She brings over 30 years of commercial lending experience in the 7A program. So she brings that commercial lender experience to our program, which is very beneficial when we're working with clients to get you through the current application process. At some point during the call, we may be joined by one or two loan specialists from the Philadelphia SBA, and we'll introduce them when they do come on. So again, Marcia, I'll turn it over to you right now and let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie. Good morning, everybody. So bear with me. I have a couple of dogs in the background that you may hear periodically. We have some work being done outside and they're protecting the house. Anyhow, so let's get started. This is hopefully there have been some changes overnight again. So I'm going to hopefully I understand what they are. So it's they tend to do that stuff overnight. I'm not quite sure how that happens. Anyhow, this is our SBDC Disruption Recovery page. If you need information or you want to see a recording of this, that you missed something or just clarify something, some of the forms and the documents are also out there. There's all sorts of assistance on this page. This is also, the SBDC website is also where you can find the center nearest you, the SBDC center, that would be available where to assist you with, the applications and getting ready for everything. All right, next slide, please, Chris. These are just some of our services that I'm not going to go through these. This is not what you care about right this minute, but just know that we do have a lot of services available on a normal basis that we can help you with, whether you're a startup, whether you're growing the business, or business could be in a little bit of trouble. We can assist you, and it doesn't cost you anything. So next, this is the Philadelphia District SBA office. There's one in the east and one in the west. This is the contact information for the east. And then the west one is on the next slide is in Pittsburgh. So what they're trying to encourage people to do is the center that you would be affiliated with is, if you do reach out to SBA, go to that particular center. They are, this all has been pretty overwhelming. There just been so many people calling, emailing, the whole thing. And then the SBA folks now with the PPP program coming online have been just inundated with phone calls and emails. So bear with us. It's quite busy and trying to get help to as many people as possible. Next slide, please. This is a map of all of our SBDC centers across the state. As you can see, there are 16 of them, all taking care of different counties. So you would find the SBDC office that covers your county, and that's who you would reach out to. And the next slide there's the contact information for each of the centers. Now, keep in mind that also is on the PA SBDC website. Next, please. So what we're going to talk about today is, first we're going to talk about the EIDL loan, and it's the emergency loan that is a loan directly by the SBA. So the funds come from the Treasury. So we're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to talk about, how it's really, they've simplified the application so much. It's really not hard. We'll talk about timelines and how you can estimate your economic loss. And then, as I mentioned, there's lots of support out there from various organizations, SBA, those of us at the SBDC, CEDOs, those are Certified Economic Development Organizations, the WBC Women's Business Center, SCORE, Chambers of Commerce, veterans organizations are all out there to assist. They're all, everybody wants to help the small businesses to get through this. Next, please. All right, so the EIDL loan, economic injury disaster loan, is loan up to $2 million. So, but SBA will determine the amount of the loan. It's a loan of up to 30 years. And if you are a for-profit business, the interest rate is fixed at 3.75% for the life of the loan. And nonprofit businesses, the rate is 2.75% fixed for the life of the loan. Like I said, the SBA will make a determination about how much you get. I mean, you can offer them additional information if you don't agree with them when they contact you, but so they will probably require some supporting documentation. We'll get to that when you see how simple the application is. And we're encouraging everybody, even if you don't know if you're going to need the money, apply for it anyhow. You have up to 6 months to decide whether or not you want to take the money. So apply for it, and then you can decide later. One of the most important things is your credit score. Now SBA has lowered the threshold on the credit scores several times, but it is still a very, very important thing, and you need to know what your credit score is. So when they contact you, if they say, well, gee, what about, this credit score? Why is it the way it is? You need to be able to explain it. And sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that I've seen over the years that would allow them to get comfortable, even if, you've had some concerns on the credit score. Check your credit score. Go on to one of the websites like Credit Karma is the one that always comes to mind for me. It's the one I use. And realize that it will not impact your score if you're the one checking your score. It's only when somebody else pulls credit on you. The other thing is a lot of people have a block on their credit reports, not allowing anybody to pull a credit bureau report. If you do have that lock on, make sure you take it off, because the SBA does need to pull a report. And like I said, you won't be asked about a loan amount. They're going to do something based on the gross margin, and the information you're going to provide will give them an estimate of what that is. My guess is they are going to eventually ask for a tax return at least 1 year as part of the application. Next slide, please. If they do require additional information after you apply, if you don't have an automatic feed on a scanner copier that can download, an entire document at one time, I suggest take a flash drive to your local copy center, like a Staples or something like that, and basically put it on a flash drive, upload it on your computer, and send it that way. Because pretty much emailing is how the whole thing is working. if you are approved for the loan, if you apply for the loan and you are approved and you take the loan, documentation is critical on these. You need to be able to demonstrate to the SBA that you're using the money appropriately, such as for mortgage interest payments, payroll, leases, and basically the company's money that you would have had the disaster not occurred. It's money you would have had from operating the business. Next, please. This is our administrator. She sits at the top of the house and is guiding the SBA. Once the allocation was made, the SBA had to determine how to put it into the guidelines that we have. So it's been there have been a lot of changes along the way. And we just ask the SBA folks are working very, very, very hard. So just be patient. This was happened very quickly. So there is a 1-year deferment on these loans. Which is really nice. So no payments basically for the first year on these to assist you with cash flow. And they also, this is fairly recent, that they determined they were going to do automatic deferments on previous disaster loans that you may have gotten because of, hurricane, a flood, something like that, through the end of 2020. And there is a 6-month deferment on all current 7A and 504 loans and microloans. Now, there is also, because this is saying deferment, but one of my questions is, because they're also paying 6 months on any existing SBA loan, 7A, 504, or microloans, so for the next 6 months. That process has already started. If you do have an SBA loan currently, contact your lender, and especially if you're on auto charge, because that payment will automatically come out. And what SBA has said is they want you to have the ability to determine, do you want to allow them to keep that payment and pay down the principal on the loan, or would you like those funds returned to you? So that is supposed to be the business's choice. Next slide, please.
Marcia, do you have time
Sure.
for a quick question? From Emily, she has a dance studio, wants to know when she estimates my loss, do I include the money I have to refund parents along with the potential money I would have made this spring from tuition and recital profits?
No, that's part of the income of the business. What this is designed to do is to pay payroll for people who you would otherwise have laid off, and to pay the business's general, operating expenses like accounts payable, any existing loans, commercial loans that are in place, your rent, your mortgage payments, things like that. It's not designed to replace lost income.
Thank you. And another one from Chase, for nonprofits, whose credit are they pulling for the application?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm trying to think how, I don't know if the nonprofits, if a business report, credit report would be available or not. I'm not used to dealing with nonprofits because under normal circumstances, they would not be eligible for an SBA loan. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. It should not be for an individual though. And we'll get to that. There's been a lot of confusion around the nonprofits when they get to the individuals within, but they wouldn't be, yeah.
Maybe you can give some guidance on who actually from a nonprofit should fill out the application.
Yeah, might as well cover that. Basically, because this application was not designed for this particular loan, I mean, normally SBA disaster loans cover floods, hurricanes, natural disasters that are limited to a specific geographic area. And they had to take a system because, like I said, everything happened so quickly. They had to take the existing system they have and make it work for this program, where there are nonprofits who are eligible now for this program. Most of them are, But there's a section with SBA, there is always individual information that is needed. So there, as you'll see when we get to it, there are screens that say, you know, who's the owner, what percentage do they own, on and on, you know, personal information. They want a social security number. They want, you have to answer questions about arrests or convictions and all sorts of things that would normally make or break somebody getting a loan, the eligibility stuff. Well, you can't move forward in the application unless you provide the information. So what we've determined is whoever has fiduciary responsibility for the nonprofit is who should fill out the personal information. That does not mean they're going to have to be a guarantor or anything like that. It's just a way of getting them through the application so that when a loan officer calls or contacts via email, all of that will get straightened out. Ultimately, what's going to be needed is a resolution from the board that governs that nonprofit, allowing the organization to get a loan. So that question has come up over and over and over again. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Which businesses are eligible? Well, pretty much, as I just said, most nonprofits, as long as they are non-governmental nonprofits, are eligible. In the last few days, they are also allowing faith-based organizations to apply because they're realizing that the churches are hurting badly because they can't have church services, so donations are way off, I'm sure. Also, you know, any for-profit business, any small businesses, as defined by the SBA as a small business, most businesses do qualify. It's up to 500 employees, or the alternative is up to $5 million in average annual revenue averaged over a 2-year period, or 15 million in tangible net worth, are some of the guidelines they use to define a small business. And I think it's interesting they use the term small because they aren't small. So economic injury disaster loan terms, how much can I borrow? As we said, up to 2 million. We covered the interest rate already. These loans are up to 30 years. So you have a long time frame to pay them off. We already talked about the size standard. How can you use the loan funds? For the EIDL loan, which is what we're talking about here, it's working capital. It can be used to pay fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, any other bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. So as I just mentioned, it's not intended to replace lost sales or profits or for expansion. So keep that in mind. We every once in a while get a question about, you know, expanding the business, redoing their website or whatever. No, that's not what it's for. What is the EIDL Advance? This is interesting because this was something else that evolved once the program was up and running. Applicants there's a spot on the application, you'll see they can request an advance of up to $10,000 immediately. That advance is supposed to hit your account within 3 days. Now, they have been slower than that. I will warn you. I think that I heard last week, the ones that had applied last Monday were finally starting to see those funds hit their account by Friday. Now, the operative word here is up to $10,000. It is roughly based on number of employees. Then they said it's about $1,000 per employee up to that $10,000. So and this is money that won't need to be paid back. So that's the beauty of this. This is an advance that will turn into a grant, whether or not you are approved for the loan. So even if you're declined for the loan, you can keep whatever that advance was for, you know, anyhow. So it's just a little extra help along the way. How do I request it? Well, so basically anybody who applies will, you know, if you check the box, you'll be able to get that advance. All right, now the next slide, please. We already talked about this. To pay fixed debts, payroll accounts, other payables, that $10,000 you need to be able to show if if asked, how you spent the money. So again, it's not for an expansion, not for anything other than, your fixed debts, your payroll, your accounts payable. That's what it's for. It is not to replace lost profits. The EIDL loans are working capital loans, are different from other SBA loans. These come directly from the Treasury. Most of you, if any of you have had an SBA loan in the past, they're usually done either through a CDC or for the 504 loans, or a bank, for the 7A loans. The PPP loan does still function that way, but for the EIDL loan, this is a loan where SBA determines whether or not you're going to get the loan and the amount of the loan, and the funds come directly from the US Treasury. So you don't go to a bank to apply for this one, and there is confusion about that. You go online and you're going to fill out the forms that we're going to go over momentarily. There's no obligation to take it if it's offered, and up to $25,000, there is no collateral required, which is nice. There are no personal guarantees, no collateral on up to $25,000. Now loans, actually, there is no guarantee required on loans up to $200,000. Over $200,000, they will take a personal guarantee. The only collateral they're going to take for, no matter what the amount is over $25,000, is a UCC filing. It's a blanket lien on your business assets. They're not taking any business real estate. They're not taking any personal real estate. Just a blanket UCC filing. If you have an existing disaster loan, you can still qualify for an EIDL loan. But the two can't be consolidated. You'd have two separate loans. So if you have a previous disaster loan, that's okay. You're still eligible to apply for an EIDL loan. Next, please. Who is eligible? The agricultural enterprises are ineligible. Sorry, we're on that screen. So if you're a farm, sorry, you're not eligible. If you are an ag-related business, such as producing feed for livestock, if anything related, if it's a dairy farm that makes cheese and they sell the cheese, so ag-related businesses are eligible. You're also not eligible if you're involved in any illegal activity on a federal level. Think marijuana businesses these days. That's one that SBA, where you would not be eligible. Businesses that are involved in basically legal gambling, if more than a third of their income comes from the legal gambling activities. For some of it, just think Pennsylvania lottery is one where you could sell lottery tickets, and as long as not more than a third of the income comes from that, you would still be eligible. Next, please. How to apply. This is where you go. Basically, if in doubt, if you can't remember this entire string, just go to sba.gov. It'll guide you through till you get to the application. I've been getting questions about, well, suppose I don't have internet access and don't deal with that. And I had one of the consultants contact me and asked about it for a client who is Amish. So you can call customer service for guidance on that. It is possible to fill out a paper form for it, or I guess that's the only way they could do it, but you need to contact customer service for that. And then correspondence can be mailed to this address on the bottom of the screen. Next, please. So as I said, there's lots of assistance out there that is available for, putting together whatever financial documents they do end up requesting. We don't know what that's going to be. In the beginning, it was very different. They were asking for very specific information, and the application has changed drastically, but we do believe there will be follow-up requesting documentation. So in order to get some assistance, I already talked about this, The SBDCs are there to help you, SBA's there to help you, SCORE's there to help you, women's business centers, veterans, business outreach centers, your local chambers. There's lots of help available. And you can find them on the SBA website. All right, let's dive into the application. This is really simple. I actually, before SBA provided a slide deck, I actually ran through one of an application and did a test application. This is, once you click on apply for the loan, you'll see the website walks you through how to get to this point. This is the first thing you'll see. So the first screen it's all the disclosures. It talks about, who's eligible and that they're relying on your information. Let's go down, please. And then you have to select what type of entity are you. If your type of entity isn't listed here, you aren't eligible. So one of those has to be chosen. The other thing to be important, and we can jump down the next screen, is it's all of the things you need to be able to check off. And typical SBA, they like to write questions backwards. So for example, that first one says, applicant is not engaged in any illegal activity as defined by federal guidelines. So you need to check the box if that is true, that you were not engaged in that. After 30 years of this, I guess I'm used to it, but I still get a chuckle out of it. And just be very, very cautious, because you're going to have to certify that everything you are telling them is true and correct, and that you're going to use the funds as you disclose in the application, and even on the other loan. It is imperative you tell them the truth. If you use these funds for fraudulent purposes, they will come after you. I promise you. It may not happen tomorrow, but it will happen. These are taxpayer dollars being used, so they are very cautious, and they like to emphasize that the funds must be used appropriately. Next, please. So, oops, I missed that doesn't matter. On that last screen, once you've checked off all of the boxes as appropriate, the button on the bottom that says continue, it's gray when you start off, and it turns blue when you've done what you need to do. No. And then here's the first page. This is the business information. Before you start, there's little green strips along the left-hand side of those fillable boxes will all be red, and there are little red asterisks as well. Those little strips will turn green as you supply the information, and it's just basic information on the business is all it is. And it continues down onto the next screen, where you'll fill in, what are your gross revenues? What are your cost of goods sold? That's how they're going to determine your gross profit margin. And then there are also other sources of income. Perhaps if you have rental properties and you've lost rent due to the disaster, those should be listed as well. So there are now, churches are eligible now. The next step was talking about non-secular businesses that maybe a church would own, but they still want to see that, but churches are now eligible for these loans. And then the services provided by any faith-based entity. Compensation from other sources that you would have received as a result of the disaster. Like there's community loans, there was a state program that it's closed now, but you would disclose anything like that. You can't double dip on these programs, but what I am told is that as you'll see, the PPP program is designed mostly for payroll, where this program allows you to pay your normal operating expenses with some payroll as well, but just can't double dip. You would have to apply for different reasons to the various available programs.
Marcia, do you have time for a couple questions here?
Sure.
Okay. Is a full-time employee counted the same as a part-time equivalent?
The SBA talks about it in terms of FTEs. So your part-time employees would count, but you calculate it as full-time equivalents. So if you have 2 employees, each working 4 hours a day, that's 1 full-time equivalent. So think about it that way and just add them all up to arrive at the number of full-time equivalents.
Okay, and Michael on YouTube has a question concerning, he has himself on a 1099 and 2 other employees. It's questioning if that makes him eligible for the $3,000.
No, he'd only be eligible for his own. If the other 2, if he's a 1099 and the other 2 are 1099s, they are all eligible to apply on their own.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the business address, you have to supply, and business phone number. It's really important to make sure you have an accurate phone number and email address, because that's how they're going to contact you. Next slide, please. So then you finish filling all of this out, and it's there's a difference between business established and the current owner. That can get confusing at times. So whenever that business was established, and perhaps you bought it 10 years ago, so you would put the date that the business was actually established, whenever that was, and then your current ownership is how long have you owned it. And then there you have to tell it the basic things that the activity, it's a drop-down box that determines business activity. And number of employees, that's important too. And then the little button at the bottom turns blue and you can proceed. This is the 3rd section of the application. This is where you put in the personal information for at least 1 individual, sometimes more. So this top question, I always like to hit on this one: is your business owned by a business entity? Sometimes you have a company that has its own EIN, but it is owned by a parent company. So that's what it's asking. Is there another entity above the entity for which you are applying? Because they're going to look at affiliation and make sure that the business is considered a small business based on affiliation. Next, please. So this is where, the first owner or agent would supply their information. I've already explained about nonprofits. Somebody has to fill this in. And as I said, typically it's whoever has fiduciary responsibility for the nonprofit, if in fact it's a nonprofit. And then if it's, a regular for-profit business, you're going to put in, who you are and basically the ownership that you have. And for anybody owning 20% or more, we can go down to the next screen, that you'll click on that button for as many times as you need a screen for anybody owning 20% or more of the business. Next, please. So now we're in additional information. These are a lot of qualifiers for whether or not you're eligible. Again, they do hit on that. Now it's interesting, there's been some guidance overnight that one of the questions is, have you been arrested or convicted in the past year of any criminal offense? So they've determined that if it hasn't happened, I forget now the number of years. Felonies generally would not be cleared, but if the felony occurred 20 years ago, they're okay with that for this apparently. That's brand new overnight, but you do need to answer all the questions and answer them truthfully, because again, they will come after you, I promise. Next screen, please. This is whether or not you've had any assistance in preparing to get the loan. So sometimes there are brokers and things out there, whoever, they want to know who helped you with the application and whether you paid anything for that assistance. And it's only if you, they're saying actually whether or not you paid a fee for the service. So you do fill this out and check yes or no if you want them to be able to talk to the representative. Here's where you click for the up to $10,000 advance. If you don't click that, you're not going to get it. So be sure that you you do click that if you want to be considered for that advance. Next screen, please.
Marcia, we have a couple technical questions here.
Sure.
I submitted our application last week, got a confirmation number, and have not heard back. I made a mistake on the form. Would that mean our application would be eliminated?
No, not really. Somebody should be reaching out to you. There's really not much you can do until somebody does reach out to you. Just realize, we heard yesterday, or I heard yesterday, that they've had now over 1 million applications. That's a lot of applications, and they were hiring additional staff to assist, additional loan officers to assist in processing the applications. But I mean, figure 3 or 4 weeks probably now. I understand they did get a lot cleaned up over the weekend, but they have been inundated. I cannot even imagine what it's like dealing with the number of applications they're getting in. So be patient is what I would urge you.
And from Brendan on YouTube, how should service businesses enter their cost of goods sold?
That's a little trickier when you're going to actually have to, because there are some businesses that simply don't have a gross margin. You're absolutely right. So you're going to look at your income, but you're going to put your revenue in, and there is a place on the form for operating expenses as well. So you just put that in, and the gross margin, the cost of goods sold would just be 0. So, but they're the ones who are going to determine the amount of the loan. You will have the opportunity to talk with them if you don't agree with them, or to provide them additional information that might allow them to, consider a higher amount. Okay.
And one more from Kim. She applied for EIDL and PPP. No one said that you couldn't apply for both. Which would be best for a sole proprietor?
It's hard to say. It depends on the nature of the business. You have to look at your individual operation and try to make a determination how long you think you might need assistance. Because, and we'll compare them at the end, but there are important differences. This loan program, the EIDL loan program, is the eligible expenses go from February 15th through December 21st. That's a much longer time period than the PPP loan. The Paycheck Protection Program loan is only good for a period of 8 weeks. So that's a huge difference. So it really depends on your business. I mean, everybody needs a crystal ball these days to try and figure out how long we think the shutdown is going to continue. I can't imagine they're going to be able to have businesses shut down through the end of the year or anything, but it certainly is going beyond the 8 weeks. So it's really based on an individual basis and the needs that you have. What I would suggest is, if you get approved, you look at both of them and say which makes the most sense for me. But without knowing the business or the business cycle, it's kind of hard to predict, because I've talked with a few individuals, and in one case I recommended the EIDL loan, even though it has to be paid back, and the PPP loan does not have to be paid back. There are some instances where the EIDL loan makes more sense, some instances where the PPP loan makes sense. So then on this is part of the form for the EIDL loan. This goes along with, because of the advance that you're requesting, you need to give them a bank name, an account number, and a routing number. The routing number is, for those of you who don't know, if you look at a check for the account, it's all the way to the left on the bottom of the check. That's the first series of numbers is the routing number. And then this is where you're certifying that everything you've told them is true and correct. And you're going to check that box at the bottom. That's as good as a signature. And you're going to say, you go to the next screen then. So now this is the last screen on the EIDL application. This is where you can just check your work. This is a summary of everything you put in there. If you see something that doesn't look correct, hit the edit button. It'll take you back to the screen. and you can correct the information before you submit. I urge you to check your work a couple of times before you hit submit, because once you hit submit, you can't get the application back. Next, please. And it'll just continue. At the very bottom, you have to check that box that says I am not a robot. And then once you hit that submit button, you are done until you hear from somebody. You will get an immediate application number. Make sure you note that number because you will need it again. So make sure you make note of that number. And like I said, a couple of critical things, make sure your email and your phone number are correct. Next, please. And then, there's lots, like I said, there's lots of information available. There's there'll be somebody out there who can answer the questions. They do get a bit confusing at times. Do we have any questions while Chris is pulling up the next stuff?
Yeah, so so this nonprofit applied for EIDL and PPP. Are there other SBA programs that we should be looking at?
These are the only two I'm familiar with right now. Apparently, I'd say go on the website. I don't know what else might be out there. There were rumblings about some kind of credit. I honestly don't know. It's all I can do to keep up with these two, believe me. But I'd go on the website because you can, anything else that's available, you can find there.
Okay, and from Marie, I'd also like to know about how applying for these two programs and possibly unemployment as a self-employed business works.
I don't know about unemployment for self-employed. Typically, you would not be eligible for it, but you could have to contact the unemployment office for information on that. Again, I don't keep up on those rules, but just realize you can't collect under this and collect unemployment at the same time. It's one or the other. What this allows you though is to stretch out the amount of time in case you need the unemployment later. So, this is a pretty good program. So it's a decision you have to make to determine what makes the most sense for you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. This is the next program. This is the PPP program, as I will refer to it, Paycheck Protection Program. Now, this program is designed to not turn into a loan. It can turn into a loan if you don't do things properly. But if you use the funds for something other than what is allowed under this program, it does turn into a loan. Otherwise, if you have your documentation and you use the funds appropriately, this turns into a grant. So this is, and I've started getting this question too. People asking me where they should send their application for this one. No, you go to a bank that participates in SBA lending. Now, what's happening is there are SBA lenders out there who, have done these loans for years. What we're finding is that they typically are going to deal with their own customers first, and then they might take on some non-customers. So far, I'm not, there are one or two banks who may have agreed to do that. I think some of the others are starting to loosen up, but for the time being, I would say check with your bank to see if they do SBA lending. If so, they've been granted special status for this period of time to apply for these loans. But that's how you apply, through a bank or a credit union or any authorized SBA lender. There are new banks signing up just to do this. So that's something else to be aware of. That's the other thing the people at SBA are dealing with, is all these new banks who want to become SBA lenders. So not only do they have borrowers beating down the door, they've got the banks that they need to get signed up so that they can assist. So it is through participating lenders, and there is, to find a lender, that's where you can go at sba.gov/paycheck protection/find, because these are temporary that they are signing up. So it's important to go there because as there are new banks coming online. It's designed to provide a direct incentive for small businesses to keep their workers on the payroll. This program is primarily for payroll. You can include some other items in it up to 25% of the loan, but 75% of this loan, in order to have it forgiven entirely, must be for payroll. And that would include benefits for the employees that we'll get in a little more detail a little bit later, but basically your payroll, your vacation benefits, sick leave, pretty much anything. If you have contributions to a retirement account as a normal course of business, all of that is included in this. It is an 8-week period of your choosing, up through, well, you have, it has to be calculated on between February 15th and June 30th. And then the borrower has to have all workers back on the payroll by June 30th. And then you can choose an 8-week period that you're going to cover going forward. But you got to have the loan in place to start paying that 8-week period. And that would be available through the end of the year. So you would choose, as long as you've applied for the loan prior to June 30th, you can use the benefits going into the future. It can be used to pay some interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. But again, the focus is payroll. They want to try and get paychecks in people's hands that otherwise are laid off. And if you have laid them off, like I said, you have till June 30th to bring them back.
Marcia, we have a couple questions on YouTube.
Okay.
From Julia, can self-employed people set up as a single member LLC use Triple P if they don't have a payroll system set up?
It would be based on, you don't have to even go through all of that. If you're a sole proprietor, you're eligible to apply. You can do, it's based on the profitability of the business at that point. So, but it would have had to been in existence by February 15th in order to do something like that. So I would say just apply, and it's based on your Schedule C in your personal tax return.
Okay. And Julie asked if Triple P can be used for home mortgage or just business mortgage.
Just business, and it's just the interest on the mortgage. This is not to be used for anything other than payroll, interest on mortgages, payment of rent, payment of utility bills. That's it.
And can somebody self-employed that takes a direct draw from the business profit apply for both EIDL and Triple P?
You can't double dip, so you can't use it for the same thing. So if you want to cover your payroll, you can cover your payroll, say under PPP, and apply for the EIDL to pay the other fixed expenses, but you cannot double dip. That's critical.
And how do sole proprietors verify profitability for loan forgiveness?
The same way anybody else would. You're going to be cutting checks to yourself. You've got your Schedule C that shows, what the profitability was over the past 12 months, or whatever time period you choose. You can use 2019 and show that profitability, and then as you go forward, you're going to be paying yourself. So you're going to show proof of that payment in the form of a canceled check or transfer to a personal account or something like that. That should be sufficient. You're certifying, every time you take a draw on one of these loans, you are certifying to the bank that you've used these funds appropriately. And that's the critical part.
Thank you.
Okay. 8 weeks of, how can it be used? Up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, including benefits. So that's important. So they're saying, when can we apply? This program went live last Friday for businesses and sole proprietors, and it goes live this Friday for independent contractors and self-employed individuals. So that's the time frame. Okay, here are the parameters. It is a maximum loan of up to $10 million. And if there is a residual loan at the end where you haven't been able to prove how you used all of the funds, there will be a residual loan that will carry an interest rate of 1%. And it's a 2-year loan. They want it paid back in 2 years. If, like I said, if there is a loan still there, it should be self-liquidating if you do everything right, and you shouldn't have a balance. The first payment is deferred for up to 6 months under this program, where with the EIDL program, it's deferred for an entire year. So you really need to weigh the two as far as, you know, which program makes the most sense. There are no collateral requirements for this particular loan program. So it's an unsecured loan, and there are no personal guarantees. It's the first time I've ever seen SBA do something with no personal guarantees. So this is a first. There are also no fees on this loan, neither the borrower nor the lender. And under normal circumstances, SBA loans do have fees because it's designed so that taxpayer dollars don't get involved usually, but in this case they are. It's taxpayer dollars that are supporting this program, and it's available through June 30th. So in other words, you'd have to be approved by June 30th in order to participate in this program. So keep that in mind. That date will come up quickly. I already said this, but it bears repeating. It's fully forgiven when at least 75% of the funds are used for payroll. And forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. So, you know, you need to get your employees back, you know, once you have this approved, but they must be back by June 30th. Who's eligible? This one, any small business with up to 500 employees is eligible for this loan. That makes most businesses in the United States eligible. It's available for nonprofits. For this program, it's just the 501c3s. It's available to veterans organizations and faith-based organizations. So churches can apply for this one as well. It's available to sole proprietorships and self-employed people and independent contractors. Next, please.
Marcia, we have a couple questions.
Sure.
So from Patty, so if we had a 20% reduction in hours paid, do we have to make employees whole during this period or just bring them back before June 30th to get the full forgiveness?
They have to bring them back before June 30th at their prior wages.
Gotcha.
So that's important.
Yep. From Elizabeth, can a business that was scheduled to open during this disaster apply for triple P based on projected payroll?
As long as they were in existence, they obviously wouldn't have had any payroll or anything to rely on because they wouldn't have hired anybody yet. But if they were in, the midst of construction and they already have a loan and they already have expenses, they can apply to get some of those expenses covered.
Okay, and from Carlisle and YouTube, he's asking, does rent payment interest include amounts paid on equipment lease rental?
That's a good question. For this program, I know for EIDL it would. On this one, they were stating mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments. So I'm not aware that you'd be able to pay lease payments under this because it doesn't involve other commercial debt that you might have, and that's what that would be considered. You can ask a lender, but I really don't think equipment leases would be eligible. I should check on that one though.
Okay, and from Greg, is it possible to use triple P to cover 8 weeks of payroll costs in EIDL to cover payroll costs beyond that if needed?
If it's for a different time period, you have to be able to prove it's for a different time period, I would think. But I'm not 100% certain. I'm getting some really tough questions these last couple days. We're
Okay.
gonna need further guidance on that one.
Yeah.
I do want to ask that question though. I thought of that and then I never remembered, so.
Okay,
I
we'll
need to
get
make-
clarification on that one.
Yeah. Okay, that'll be enough of a note for me. Okay. All right, I guess we'll keep moving here. So like we said, we talked about what you can use it for an 8-week period after receiving the loan. And it becomes self-liquidating as long as 75% of the loan is used for payroll and maintain staff and payroll. If you use more than 75% for other than payroll, you're going to end up with a loan. And if you maintain staff and payroll at less than what the level was at February 15th, you're going to owe money on the loan because they're going to calculate that. So you can't apply for it at one level and then use it at a lesser level. That's what that is getting at. So they want to make sure that these employees are being compensated the way they always were. They don't want you taking the money away from employees to do these other things. The way the calculation is done, it automatically adds a portion that would be able to be used for other than the payroll to cover the mortgage interest and utility payments, rent payments, whatever. Because what they do, since it's 8-week period, they calculate it, they take the payroll and then they have you multiply it by 2.5%. And that's, since it's only 2 weeks or 8 weeks that are covered, that extra 0.5 is what covers some of these other expenses. The lender will calculate that part. All you have to do is give them the evidence. And back to that one that asked about payroll, if they haven't opened yet, that's a situation where, because this is guided towards payroll, you're probably, other than yourself, which you'd be able to apply for compensation, but you're probably better off with an EIDL loan because it'll cover more of your expenses than this will, even though you have to pay the EIDL loan back. To qualify for loan forgiveness, full-time employee headcount must be maintained, salaries and wages must be retained, and the borrower has until June 30th to restore full-time employment and salary levels from any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. So in other words, you got to have them back up to speed by April 26th. Next, please. The payroll costs, what counts as a payroll cost? They include a lot. Salaries, wages, commissions, even tips for waitresses and waiters, employee benefits, vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, an allowance for if you dismiss somebody and you paid them to separate, that's eligible. Group health care benefits and payments for retirement benefits. So it's a very generous allowance. What counts as payroll costs for sole proprietors and independent contractors? Here we go. We've had this question. Wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment. So, you're just going to calculate that and tell them, what it is. As long as you're telling them the truth, it's okay. Next, please. And that's the end of that slide.
Marcia?
Yes.
So from Carly, and you have a question for tipped employees in a restaurant. Well, we need to cover their wages in the hourly pay if they aren't making as much as they used to be in tips.
Say that again. So they get their wages, but they're
Right.
not making as much in tips. Can that be covered? Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, but it would have to be, her question is would she have to make that difference up in her hourly wage?
Yeah, I think so. You would put it in that way. You just have to explain the components and how you arrived at those numbers. So, and then show proof that you're paying the employee for tips. So you'd pay it as part of the wage, but I'd make it a line item, how much of it is to make up for lost tips.
Okay, and are payroll taxes included in payroll costs?
No, this is something I just read this. The payroll taxes for employees is in other words, they calculate it based on gross wages, but then there are taxes deducted. What is not taxed is the employer portion. As you know, if you're an employer, there's it's almost a double, you get hit twice. The employer taxes are not taken out. The employer doesn't have to pay their portion of the tax, but the employee taxes will be taken out. So if an employee normally makes, I don't know, $2,000 and they deduct and $500 for taxes, so the net would be $1,500, something like that. That's how that works.
Okay. And from Will up at Penn State, if you furloughed an employee October 30th, 2019, are they still considered in the triple P calculation, even though you might not bring them back on payroll?
I wouldn't think you could. I think what it says is it has to be, you know what, I need to clarify that one in my own head again, Will. Why don't you, if you're calling from the SBDC, if you're email me and I'll look at that. But I think going all the way back to October, if they were furloughed, Solomon just came on. I just saw him come in. So okay. If he's actually already on, let's get him to clarify that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He doesn't have audio yet.
Okay. All right. We'll get him to answer that when he comes on. But I think it's the prior 12 months. But if they were furloughed, that was before the disaster started. So there was another reason why that employee was let go. And I guess that's the part we'd have to understand. I've not had anybody go back that far yet.
Welcome, Solomon. This is Ernie. You want to say a few words on behalf of SBA?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So, we're learning new things every single morning, and we're seeing tremendous volume numbers, over 2 million applications accepted. And so for us, the message is we encourage small businesses out there to go ahead and apply to EIDL and/or PPP. And I'm sure Marsha's been doing an excellent job with going through the details. Two new things that I learned, and you may have already mentioned it, Marsha, is that, churches are now eligible under both programs. I think we mentioned that yesterday. And after digging a little more, it looks like, direct farming activities.
Really?
Under PPP, under the Small Business Act, we had to take a deep dive into our interim rule and discovered that, agriculture, livestock, what would be traditionally considered direct farming activities are in fact eligible as long as the enterprise has gross receipts of less than $750,000 per year. So
wow.
Something to keep in mind. And, but certainly if there's any questions that we aren't able to answer today, I'll be sure to send me an email and I'll do the best I can to get an answer for you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Solomon. That's good information. That's a new one. So, but we just had a question pop up, Solomon. I'm going to put you on the spot right away. And it's because they just asked it and I'm kind of scratching my head.
Can't promise you anything, but I'll do the best I can.
I understand. Like I said, this stuff's changing so quickly. It's hard to keep up. There was somebody who asked, they had an employee that they furloughed last October and wanted to know, could they bring them back on payroll? And I said, I don't think so, but I would need to check.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's, it's really looking at what normal conditions were, as of this February 15th date. And so that's really what we're trying to identify. How do we make, how do small businesses make their staff whole under normal conditions? So I would agree with your response on that, Marsha.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Will's question was, would that individual still be considered in the triple P calculation, even though they might not bring them back on payroll?
Well, what were the number of employees or full-time equivalents as of February 15th, 2020?
Okay.
Yeah. And then one more.
That should be used.
Okay,
Gotcha.
one more that you may be able to answer. Equipment leases. Now, we talk about leases. I think it would apply under EIDL, but I think the PPP is a little narrower and only allows for mortgage interest and rent
Correct.
and utilities. So I would say
No.
equipment leases would not.
No.
Okay.
No,
Then I guess,
only, yeah, leases as it relates to rent, right? Traditional rent,
right. So, yeah, so I guess right on that
not
one.
eligible.
Okay. I don't know. I wrote another note and I know I don't know what it meant. So sorry. All right. We just got to the comparison screen between the two programs. This is a really nice guide for showing you the differences and maybe helping you make a determination what makes sense for you. Now we're gonna go through. I was supposed to send this to you, Solomon. I don't remember if I did or not. If I didn't, let me know, please. But anyhow, we're going to do a side-by-side comparison here between EIDL and PPP. EIDL is the first program we went over today. PPP is the one we just finished. So for the EIDL loans, who's the lender? It's the SBA, and the funds then come from the Treasury. Under PPP, the bank does a loan under the 7A program, and it is underwritten by the bank, not by SBA. But they're following SBA's guidelines. So, and then with the maximum loan amount, it's up to $2 million under EIDL, the one on the left, and when that's the one that carries the up to $10,000 advance, as long as you apply for it when you do the application. And the PPP program is the maximum loan is up to $10 million. So they're taking 2.5 times the average monthly payroll costs measured over 12 preceding months. You can also use the calendar year, I believe. And then there are ways to also calculate for seasonal businesses. And like I said, the 2.5 times, the reason it's that, because it's only 8 weeks it's actually covered, is because they are allowing you to use up to 25% for something other than payroll. And now I think we already have determined that nobody got funds under EIDL between February 15th and April 3rd when the PPP program rolled out. If somehow you did, that loan could be rolled into the PPP, but then it would be a loan, it would not be forgiven. So, and then we already went through, what all can be included in payroll. It's all of the salaries, commissions, tips, employee benefits, state and local taxes, and certain types of compensation for sole proprietor and independent contractors. The one thing is the compensation limit would be based on no more than $100,000 per employee. If their wages exceed $100,000, you would only use $100,000 to calculate the benefit under the program. So they do cap it. Interest rate on an EIDL loan is 3.75% for for-profit businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. On any unforgiven portion of a PPP loan, the interest rate is 1% and the repayment term is 2 years. For the EIDL loan, it's up to 30 years. So it really depends on where your need is as to which program makes the most sense for you. Also, like I said, the term that is covered under an EIDL loan is much greater than the window they are looking at for the PPP. The PPP, they're looking at, between February 15th and June 30th. So, and it's only to cover an 8-week period. So huge difference there. And then the first payment is not due on an EIDL loan until 1 year later. Pardon me, interest is accrued during the deferment period. And on the PPP, it's 6 months after the loan origination. And if it's part of the loan that is forgiven by The SBA, in other words, the SBA will make the payments to the lender. They will also pay any accrued interest on the portion that is forgiven. So hopefully that becomes a self-liquidating loan. Basically under EIDL, what can you use the loan for? Operating expenses that could have been met if the disaster had not occurred for a period of between February 15th through December 21st of 2020. So as you can see, it's a longer period of time. And then and that one covers a lot more things, as we've really talked about a lot. The PPP is primarily for payroll expenses. 75% of the loan would need to be used for payroll. What collateral is required? Under EIDL, they're going to look for a UCC filing on the business assets, and on the PPP, there's no collateral and no personal guarantees. And then on the EIDL loan for owners who own 20% or more of the business, they would be required to guarantee on an EIDL loan if the loan exceeds $200,000. I need to fix that slide to say in excess of $200,000. Is it a loan forgiveness program under EIDL? No, the loan has to be repaid, like I said, 30 years, up to 30 years at 3.75%. And then this explains the calculation on the PPP loan. Basically, if you're going to use other expenses that you're going to pay, those things would have had to be in place by February 15th. So in other words, if you took out a mortgage and it was after February 15th, it wouldn't be eligible to be covered under this. Everything that you put, your utility bills, anything that wasn't in place by then won't be covered. But otherwise the loan is forgiven. What reduces forgiveness? We went through that in pretty good detail. If you reduce compensation for an employee by more than 25%, and you have until June 30th restore your full employment to salary, and salary levels for any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. Solomon, what is that April 26th date? That one keeps tripping me up.
April 20. I think we had talked about, I guess if you wanted the full 8 weeks.
It has to be by then. Yeah. Okay.
Full 8 weeks.
Okay.
You take that out through the end of June.
Yeah. Okay. And you will not have to have filed your 2019 taxes to apply. They're not worried about that. If they do look for information, they'll either go back to 2018 or you can even probably provide internally prepared 2019 numbers, whichever I think probably is the best for you. How long will the application take? Well, you heard what Solomon said. They've now had over 2 million applications. So you need to be patient. You need to allow time for them to get through this. I cannot even imagine what they are dealing with. As I said, everybody all the way down to the district office, they are real troopers, and they are being inundated, not just by borrowers, but now by banks as well. So please be patient. They're doing the best they can. And, this was all thrown at SBA in a very short period of time. And they did a mad scramble. I'm quite impressed with what I've seen, even though, there've been some blips and things, but it's to be expected under the circumstances.
Marsha,
yes.
Well, there's a question here I wanted to run by Solomon from Carlisle Cares organization. His question was, when I complete the application, do I select that I am a private nonprofit, even though they are a public nonprofit? There's not an option for public.
Yeah. So I'd probably have to get a little bit more information from them, but certainly, if they're doing an EIDL loan, really private nonprofits are the organizations that are eligible. So they could send me an email if they want to get more. I would want to get more clarity on exactly what type of organization they are. So you can give them my email, whatever makes sense. But
Right.
based on the rules right now, private nonprofits and the fact that we incorporated churches, that's the other thing that was added for nonprofits.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of eligibility, yeah.
Can I apply now? Yes, actually, everybody except independent contractor. Well, for EIDL, yeah, that's been around for a number of weeks now. The PPP just started last Friday. This Friday, I mentioned independent contractors and self-employed individuals become eligible as well to apply. And then I think we kind of beat to death what types of entities and the size standards. We did talk about all of that for both programs. Who can apply? We talked about that, I think, in pretty good detail too. So I think that's it. Either questions? I know we want to give Chris a little time too. Are there other questions though, Ernie?
Marcia?
Yes.
The question on your note there was regarding whether business can, when applying for both PPP and EIDL, can use EIDL funds to cover payroll after the PPP period has concluded.
That's right. That was the question. Thank you. Solomon, that's a new one. Did you hear this?
Yeah, no, I did hear it. So we've been saying, so, if EIDL loans were used for payroll costs, it certainly doesn't affect your eligibility for PPP. But, if it was not used, I should say, let me just be clear. So if EIDL funds were not used for payroll costs, it does not affect your eligibility for PPP. If the EIDL loan was used for payroll costs, then typically your PPP loan would be used to refinance the EIDL loan. So now what the question is, after you've used up your PPP funds on payroll, can EIDL be used for remaining payroll, working capital? And and so that sounds like, if there's still a need to cover working capital, it sounds like EIDL would be able to be used for that. That sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, it does sound reasonable because it's not for the same purpose. They would have exhausted the PPP. I wasn't 100% sure, but thank you. Glad you jumped on when you did. All right, anything else? And then I guess we'll let Chris, you're gonna enlighten everybody on cybersecurity.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia. Yeah, hi, my name's Chris Walk. I'm the IT director for the Pennsylvania Small Business Development Centers. Just a word about cybersecurity. Cyber criminals thrive in an environment where there's chaos, where there's confusion, where there are a lot more questions than answers, and that certainly characterizes the current moment. As such, I want you to remember, if nothing else, the acronym BS. In this case, I mean, be skeptical. Be skeptical about whatever communications you may receive purporting to be from the SBA, the SBDC, or lenders. If you get an email, try to authenticate, try to verify the authenticity of that sender. The email address should always be coming from sba.gov or your lender's address. If there are any links, be very careful about clicking those links. I encourage you to bookmark your lender's website, bookmark the sba.gov site, interact with those sites using those bookmarks rather than clicking links. Likewise, in any text messages you receive, any phone calls you receive. If you have any doubts about the authenticity of an email you receive, please, I encourage you to send that along to your SBDC consultant, or you can forward along to me at info@pasbdc.org, and I'll take a look. If you do choose to do that, please don't include any attachments. I want to make sure I continue to preserve your security and privacy. Just send along the email itself, and I'll do my best to take a look and make sure that it is safe to reply to and interact with that sender. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I just did see another question, somebody asking where to apply for the PPP. These are through the lending institutions. Anybody authorized to make an SBA loan, it can assist you with that if they're participating in this program. So I would start with your individual bank, and if they don't do them, there's a whole list of participating lenders on the SBA website. Now, with a word of caution, some of those banks are only taking care of their own customers if you're not an existing customer. There are a few out there who are willing to take applications from non-customers, but my understanding is that most of them are not taking on new customers because of some of the restrictions. Do you have anything to add to that, Solomon?
No, I agree. I think the lookup table where you can identify another SBA participating lender is helpful. I would say that, if anyone is struggling to find an SBA lender, please, again, contact me and we'll do our best to try to get you connected with SBA lenders that may be looking at non-customers. We know that that's a challenge that we're trying to escalate and get some visibility on. So solomon.wheeler@sba.gov. Go ahead and send me an email.
Thanks, Solomon. And if we don't have any other questions, Ernie, I think that's probably it. I'll let you wrap it up.
Thank you, Marcia. I just want to remind folks again that today's recording will be posted up to the PA SBDC website, and you can listen to it or download it from there. And also the links to today's slide decks will be posted there. And remember that we are doing these every morning at 9 a.m. Throughout the rest of this week. And we do have a new program that we're launching on Saturday for established businesses about managing and maintaining your credit score during this economic disruption. That program will take place at 10:30, and that program is posted on our PA SBDC website under events. And that'll be taking place every other Saturday if you can attend this one. So thank you, listeners and participants, for your questions. They were excellent questions today. I want to thank Solomon for joining us and clarifying a few of the SBA technical issues, Chris for his comments in support of Marcia, and finally, Marcia for another great job and clarifying and taking us through all the application issues. Take care, everybody, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.